Welcome to Pathway to Profit with the two Gregs. How are you today?
Good, I'm good. And how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Been a busy day, but can't complain too much.
Yes, those are the good ones. So what do you want to talk about today?
Today I thought it'd be interesting to go over cloud accounting and stuff and all the different softwares available. Because I've had a couple of people recently come up to me and ask kind of my opinion. So it's clearly something that people do kind of want to know. So I thought it'd be good if we could give our 2 cents from our experience of which ones we prefer.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, why don't you kick it off and why don't you tell me a little bit about your thoughts and I'll kind of jump in when it seems to make sense.
My initial thought kind of was over the kind of recent years, there's really been a move to cloud accounting, and then a lot of softwares has come about. The one that I think really drove it was Zero. From what I could see, maybe someone else started first, but they were the ones who kind of felt like when they got into it, that's really when the momentum was. And it's kind of interesting because for a long time when for accountants we were using traditional softwares which clients couldn't see and stuff, and it was very much built to for accountants. That's what it was built for. Now there's been a real change in a lot of them have become a lot more focused on the people owning the company rather than the accountants, for better or for worse. There are positives and negatives to both.
Yeah.
How much experience kind of do you have with cloud and stuff out first of all?
Well, I guess because of the gray hairs, I've been through the journey of computers from when I first started. We got given an adding machine, and one of the first skills you had to learn was how to use the adding machine. So when I remember when computers got introduced, and then it was kind of MS DOS or Microsoft as we know it now, kind of really ramped that up. And then obviously software was something that you purchased and lived on your on your computer. And sometime later, uh, I think technology expanded in terms of I think the biggest limit was really telephone systems and how much you could get over the telephone system. Now going back in time, you went through a period of time where you had everything on what was called a mainframe, and so you had what was called a client server environment without getting too nerdy about it. And that meant that all the computing was done on mainframe, and you were doing it, you were accessing it via terminal on at your desk. And then the processing power got pushed down to the PC. And what's interesting now is that in some ways it's similar to a mainframe, except for it's all over kind of the internet, and hence the word the cloud. And I think that technology enablement changed a lot of things, because in the past you used to buy your software rather than now effectively you rent software. And so I think there's a whole bunch of discussions that can come off the back of cloud computing, one being about pricing and software as a service and how that changed pricing in a lot of different ways. But specifically as it comes to uh, you know the systems, I think you kind of argue that CRMs came before accounting, and opportunity management systems. And really, if you look at a CRM, the predecessor to those was opportunity management systems, which was sales led. And it was, as that expanded and people thought, well, why am I only thinking about it before I've got a customer? I should think about my whole customer. And then that led to, customer relationship management, or CRM. And I think that really kind of led the cloud area, and probably the market leader there for large companies is probably Salesforce.com. There's a lot of other people who do it. I particularly like Zoho, who I think have a pretty good offering, particularly for the SME market. I like the fact that they have a free version, which almost kind of teaches you or indoctrinates you on how to use an opportunity management system. And I think one of the challenges, whether you're talking CRM or you're talking accounting systems, is that the skills come first, right? And I guess one of my fears with if you look at accounting software is if I go back in the day, right, and you had a ledger, which was the people who owed you money, either debtors or accounts receivable, whatever you want to call it. You had people that you owed money, creditors or accounts payable, whatever you want to call it. Those then became a line item in your nominal ledger. And you understood the fundamentals of what you were doing at that primary entry level for accounting. And I think what's happened with technology enablement is that sometimes people put the technology before the skill and they think the technology is a substitute for the skill. And I think that's where the danger comes. Now, the good thing is that I think that for kind of repetitious, lower value things that get done, technology speeds those up and enables them. But I think that, at the same time, there is a risk that people forget to learn the skills necessary in terms of what they do. And then in terms of kind of what came first, I think there was a number of different players. I mean, Sage certainly made an entrance, into the market with Sage 1, and Xero was out there, and a lot of different kind of different softwares. I think it's fair to say that Xero's kind of the unquestionable leader in the SME cloud accounting space, probably largely driven by all the number of apps that it enables to do in order to accelerate, kind of that full computing of the organization. That said, I think Zoho has an interesting suite of software as well. But yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question. But that's kind of my view is you got to look at the past in order to understand where you are. And I think the risk is, like I said, that that you lean a little too hard on the technology. I think there are some skills and that you need to learn, and I think it's really the business owner that loses out if it's kind of run in the wrong hands.
Yeah, it's interesting because on kind of learning the skills and using the technology to enable, obviously we have some clients who have Xero or QuickBooks or Free Agent, and they choose to do the bookkeeping themselves rather than have us do it, which would typically be the way we would work. And what's interesting is no matter what kind of cloud software they're on, it's very much, when you come to it, the quality of the bookkeeping is very much dictated by how much time have they put in to actually learn what they need to in order to produce what they need. And then from that, how much use they're getting out of that software. Like we had this one person who they do their own bookkeeping and they don't think about where the codes are quite enough. And so when they come to review it, the reports that they're producing aren't telling them the information they need, and that's really creating a problem for them. So it's then trying to teach them where to think more about their coding and stuff. And it's interesting how, like you say, because that technology, people feel like they can just run into it, and it's a bit like when you grow up, you crawl, walk, run, and people kind of think, oh, it's just bookkeeping, it's easy, and they go straight to run into it. and really they don't put the time to learn the basics of the bookkeeping, and then also how the software deals with different things in that bookkeeping scenario. Each software acts slightly differently and stuff. So I definitely agree with you that learning the skills is so important, no matter which kind of cloud software you go for, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a couple of interesting points, really. One that jumped out to me at the end is I don't think it's fair to say that one cloud software is best for everyone. And yeah, you look at something like Free Agent, it's for a particular type of client and does that job well. There's Sage always is heavy on controls, and that could be right in certain situations, and possibly I think maybe a little bit light on the reporting and maybe the app integration or whatever. Yeah, they're not known for that as much as Zero. So I do think it is kind of courses for courses. The second thing that you kind of highlighted was that, like you said, I think people undervalue the importance of the accurate information. And I often call it kind of my Aunt Sally, who, you didn't know my Aunt Sally, but she cleaned toilets, and she got fed up with her hands getting all wrinkly from the water. So she quit that on Friday and became a bookkeeper on Monday. And that's not discrediting all bookkeepers. There's some that are very good. But the problem is it's hard to kind of know that, out of the gate. And the problem with accounting is that you don't know you have a problem until you have a problem. And so, to your point about coding to the wrong places, I think there's two different aspects to that. One is it creating a material problem or any kind of problem that will create an issue for me on compliance? In other words, am I doing things wrong when I submit what I need to submit? The second one is it being misleading in terms of the information that I'm getting out about my business? And could I be making business decisions thinking one thing? For example, I'm making a big profit, when in actual fact, when I true it up, I'm not making as much of a profit as I can. And that's largely because people are so obsessed with looking at profit once, they don't really understand the importance of the balance sheet or how to manage the balance sheet, and so on. So I think those are kind of two or three points I think that you made that are really, really important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's and like you said, with regards, because everyone always wants to know, so which one's the magic silver bullet perfect software that is going to suit all my needs and is going to not have any issues? And unfortunately, there is no right answer to that. They all have flaws. There's flaws in all of them. There's strengths in all of them. Some of them, like Sage, they're a bit slow on the take up of cloud. They were playing a bit of catch up. But Sage have been around for a long time. They do know what they're doing. There's a lot of history there, so that they had something to fall back on. You have people like Xero who were they were first into this kind of cloud kind of thing, but again, it's not a perfect system. There are limitations to it, and like you say, there's a lot of integrating that you can do in Xero, and really that's something that we should look into in a later video and go into more detail about kind of integrating into the app. But then also, there's so many choices, and there's a lot of different ways of doing things on Xero that sometimes it can get a bit confusing for people, and it's easy to kind of make a mistake on it, and kind of it gets hidden and stuff, and other things as well. And you could go through all of them and kind of nitpick and come up with all these things. So really, I mean, it's just trying to find what works, what you kind of like, and what you find is the most valuable to yourself, which is hard because you realistically you're not going to try all of them and then come up with one answer. But what I would say is, if you do come up with an answer, you can be assured that none of them are perfect. You didn't make a wrong choice there. As long as it's doing what you need, that is the most important. And if you're getting out of it what you need to get out of it, and you're not letting, and it could, on the flip side, you sometimes people look at it too much. Sometimes they're getting too much information from it, and it's confusing them. Sometimes they're not looking at it enough. So it's making sure you get one that works with how you work and how you want your business to be controlled. And that would really be kind of what I would look for whenever I look into kind of what a client is when they ask me.
Yeah, no, I think like if we were to put some kind of terms around that, in the past, you kind of had an accounting package, you had your opportunity management software, and these things are getting integrated more and more, and that integration is becoming easier. I know, like when I look at past when I've in large companies implemented projects like that, the integration was actually a big part of the expense. Whereas now that integration is coming, a little bit easier through say apps and what have you, where they kind of partner up and they work, with that main provider, say it's Xero, or if it's Zoho, it's kind of integrated at birth because they're all out of that Zoho camp, and so on. But so when you kind of look at software as a service, which is kind of where it started, and then that's what we talked about in terms of uh, it led to pricing, it led to a lot of things, and that was all technology enabled. It then the market, kind of looked at different platforms that you may well be on, and now it's moving to where it's looking at that overall infrastructure. And I think the phrase that they use is infrastructure as a service, and that's the largest growing segment within this space is the overall infrastructure. But again, I kind of come back that I've seen people who have elaborate or very good project profitability enablement. They've worked on that. Sometimes we've helped them with that. But they kind of wanted to get there so quick. They haven't learned the skills to say, okay, so what do I do different, and how do I use that? In other words, they've not built the skills in order to let the technology enablement enable them to run a better business. And I think that's kind of what they need to kind of think about. But for me, I think you kind of gotta, if you start looking at your business as a whole and you think of it, from when I get a customer through to when I deliver what I do, when I spend all my money, when I get the profit, when that profit turns to cash, you kind of think in that lead to cash kind of way. It's kind of based on where my business is now, how much of that needs to be enabled by technology, how much of it could be done in Excel, or how much of it could be done a different way. And maybe even if the vision is that everything's enabled and you have this complete infrastructure that's enabled, probably you got to make sure that your skills are keeping pace with that integration. And but I think you have to ask yourself questions like, how do I know that I need environment? How do I know, right? I don't know. What do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's very much a kind of business by business basis. I think people work in different ways, and I think you're right. People need to work from lead to cash, but the structure of how they do that and how they make sure it's right, really, I think that the important thing is that they sit down, and when they look through it, they know that they're doing every stage of that, and they have controls there to make sure that nothing's being missed, nothing's being overlooked. They're not making silly mistakes. Maybe that's
Yeah,
technology enabled, maybe that's just more old fashioned, making notes and stuff, and making sure that they have a to-do list or something. Maybe it's, I'm going to call 10 people before 10 o'clock, and that's going to be in order to generate leads. And then between 10 and 11, I'm going to call the people that I've had a successful thing with to try and set up a meeting and stuff. So whatever that to get from that lead to cash. And sometimes that's technology enabled and through all these different apps and stuff. But sometimes people try and make a mountain out of a molehill and over complicate these things, and maybe they just need to think, is there a simpler, cheaper way I can do it? Because that's the other thing we haven't really mentioned about these cloud products. They can get quite expensive for people, especially if you're looking at integrating a lot of different things and trying to get a lot done through these apps. It can get quite expensive, and so
that's a really good point. That's a really
people
good
need to
point.
be making a decision there of, is that the best use of my money? And because if you spend it on an app, that's just a sales target. You've got to create that back through sales that these apps are helping you to get and stuff. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
I think it's a great observation. I mean, for me, I'd give for me, for each individual section, I would give kind of 5 key criteria to know that I should at least be thinking of a cloud solution. You know, number one, do I have too many manual processes? Is it just taking me too long to do that manual stuff? Then when I do that manual stuff, number two, do I have inadequate reporting that comes out of it? In other words, I need to know stuff about it and can't get it out. Now, you know, there could be other ways, right? So the instant one that goes to my mind is things like purchase order. There's lots of purchase order. They could be quite heavy, but you could get there just with a simple Excel spreadsheet. So there could be another way. But, you know, so number one, do I have too many manual processes? Number two, you know, do I have inadequate reporting that comes out of it? Number three, you know, the cost, you know, what does it cost me in terms of system maintenance of what I do now? If it's cheaper to rent via a cloud solution than it is to kind of replace that server that I have, then maybe that's the catalyst to changing and doing it. If it's not your core accounting, does it, number four, does it integrate with my accounting, you know, and other business systems? In other words, how seamless is it? Can I get it seamless? And that's where you may need to make a call. Be all Zoho, or I'm going to be all Xero. You know, that said, there's some great apps that go along with Microsoft and the new Microsoft Teams environment. So there's lots of different ones. And so, you know, does it actually need to all talk to each other, maybe? Right? Does everything need to talk to each other? I think you got to ask yourself that question. But you know, I think that's kind of the fourth question. Does it integrate with my accounting system, and does it need to? Right? If it's something that raises invoices, then hopefully it would. And then finally, is my business growing? Do I have growth, and am I experiencing a lot of change? It could be that you need the technology to enable that growth. In other words, my team is growing so much, you can only control the team if I know their timesheets, if I know what's going out the door, if I know all of those things. You may need that technology in order to have that fundamental control around a high growth environment. But I think if you ask yourself those 5 key questions, it's at least going to point you in the direction that, yes, I need to at least evaluate a cloud solution. But if at the end of it, if I go back to kind of number 3, the cloud system, it costs me more to do the cloud solution than it does just to set up a simple Excel spreadsheet that I then put into a pivot table, and I don't have the sales to warrant the investment, then I'm better to do the pivot table. You know, so I think you made a really good. I think you made a really good point. You know,
Thank you.
on that. You know, do you select what company you would go for?
Sorry?
If you were thinking about kind of, you know, do I go Zoho? Do I go Xero? Do I go QuickBooks? You know, Sage? What kind of things would you look at? Because, you know, there's also some other ones that, you know, that were new, but, you know, have been around for a while. ClearBooks, you know, and they got their funding, you know, from kind of asking a bunch of people for the money, crowdfunding. Um, so do you have a sense as to how you would kind of make those kind of decisions?
Yeah, I do. My first thing would be I would I would try and I would very much be guided by price for most people, because for most people, all of them will do what you need. And so it's finding a price that you're kind of comfortable with and looking at it and making sure that the package does offer all the services that I want. So they kind of be, so first thing is, does it offer the services that I would like? Secondly, which one is the most price competitive? And
Yeah.
then the thirdly would be, I would kind of try and speak to people who have used it and try and get a sense of kind of what are the positives and negatives of each software. A lot of accountants, for example, we as accountants use pretty much every software. We have clients in every one. I know the strengths and weaknesses of all those things. So trying to find those people who know and are used to the softwares and trying to help them. They may not know what's the best one for you, but they could at least give you some of the positives and negatives. And then whatever is important to you, you can then use that in order. And then also all of these softwares have demo packages where you can use it for free for a little bit, or they have videos on it, or they will show you around it. And pretty much all of them do that kind of free of charge. There are ways of doing it free of charge. And I would certainly spend the time to go through and look at all those videos and see how it's set up, because it's very easy to kind of get a sense of the app in general from these videos. And in my experience, they are obviously they're selling to you, so take it with a pinch of salt, but they are very much showing you, like, you get a good idea of what it looks like, of how it acts, what sort of reporting there is, and where they kind of focus on. And the bits they point out are going to be their strongest suits. They're not going to say, oh, by the way, we're not very good at the bank feed or whatever it is. They're not going to show you that. So if they're focusing on an area, you know that's where they feel that is their strongest. And you can then use that in order to kind of, again, look at what you need to be the strongest in your environment, in your business, and use that to kind of help you to manage into the best software for you.
Great. Yeah, I think the only things that I would add to that, this is maybe a good time to kind of close this out. But the other things that I would add to that is, if it's not a major company, maybe look at the financial stability of the company, what access to funds they have to kind of keep pace with the marketplace. Do they do the fundamentals as standard? In other words, do they control the balance sheet? Do they, what kind of reporting do they get out of it? And how easy is that? Yeah, QuickBooks has a good user interface, but in my experience, a lot of people make mistakes on QuickBooks, because it's almost too easy to make a mistake. If project management is important to you, does it do that? Like I said before, does it integrate with other applications, or at least the ones that are important to you, which you highlighted? What
Yeah,
kind of security standards do they have nowadays? Right? We see cybercrime
yeah,
as
it's very
being
important.
hugely important, and we'll do another kind of thing fully on cybercrime. I think that'll be a good topic later on. And then there's, the downtime, do they have what's called 5 nines as standard? Are they up 99.999% of the time? But I think, yeah, you raised some good points. I think we've probably labored this, unless you have anything else. I think this is a good time to close it out. So,
No, absolutely, I agree, and I hope that helped everyone into thinking about, if anything, what to think about when making this decision. And as always, if you do have any further questions, please feel free to contact us at My Controller. And otherwise, if you could like, share, and subscribe, that'd be much appreciated. And hopefully, see you all soon.